I'd like to thank Hélène, first of all, for organizing this event and for taking care of all the details. The evening, as you know, is dedicated to Gabor and in the celebration of his photography. And an acknowledgement of his role and of his achievement as a photographer over many years, and of our continuing interest in it. Even though some of the photographs in the exhibition are more than 50 years old, they still feel to me present and of interest in our current discourse on photography. They still feel part of our present world of photography. In planning this evening, Gabor was very adamant that the emphasis and the focus should not be solely on him as a person. And this is consistent with his character, as many of you know. But he felt that the focus should be on his photography, on his work. And with this in mind, Hélène has invited 3 friends of his, 2 older friends and 1 more recent one, to discuss his work, to talk about the relationship of their own work to his work, and perhaps talk to some extent about their own work. And when I say friends, I am of course including many of you in the audience who have known Gabor for a very long time. Our evening will be divided into 2 parts. The first part of about an hour and a half will be devoted to a kind of conversation between us as a group. It will be directed by some questions that I have and that I will ask each of the invitees to speak to. Then after that, we'll have a period of time for questions and comments, maybe reminiscences from yourself in the audience. So to formally begin, 2 of you have known Gabor for a long time and 1 more recently, and I wondered whether you might cast back to when you first met him and what those circumstances were and what your impressions of him were at that time. Perhaps I could start with Leo to begin with.
Thank you. Well, I met Gabor in the late 60s, early 70s. I don't remember the exact event and how we met, but we met. Do you remember?
February the 5th.
That's
4 o'clock in the afternoon.
So there we are. And I saw his photographs at the time. I was very much taken by his photographs. And I don't want to glorify myself, but I have to tell it to you. Anyway, I was deputy director of the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, and I was responsible for a part of the collections and the general activities. And so I could not propose these photographs for the museum's collection. But the museum at that time had no photography collection. Il n'avait pas de collection de photographie encore. And they had no idea that they would want to have one. Photography at that time was perhaps in the States and in France had reached a certain amount of glory, but in Canada that was just very secondary, something that wasn't really fit for a proper museum. And so I had, fortunately, a discretionary fund. You know, when you work in a museum, you have a little small sum of money which enables you to buy things without consulting the committee. They trust your good judgment and all that. And so I decided I would buy 2 or 3, was it? I think 2 or 3 photographs of Gabor that would enter the museum's collection. And indeed, people weren't too happy about it when they were shown, but they were not proposed because they had been bought. When they were shown to the committee, they said, well, why photography and this and that? We have so many other things to look after, and I don't know what else, and the roof is leaking, I don't know. And so the photographs finally got in. But it took time for them to enter properly the museum's collection. I just learned that they only entered in 1986, which is about 15 years later, into the museum's collection. At the time, the museum had decided that photography was a meaningful, important form of art, or beaux-arts, fine arts. And then they created a photography collection, and since then the collection has grown, and they have quite a few very interesting and powerful photographs in their collection. So that is my first glory in regards to Gabor. I found him, and he came to the museum. And since then we have been friends, we have seen each other, and I don't know, and it finally culminated in this exhibition that is circulating right now. And we're going to talk about it later a bit. So I think that was the beginning, that was my first contact, and the results of those contacts with Gabor, for which I'm very happy, and I consider myself very proud to have really singled out his photographs at that time.
Thank you. Michel.
J'ai rencontré Gabor. En fait, je voulais raconter une histoire une histoire qui existe après ma rencontre avec Gabor. Parce que peut-être que je vais revenir sur cette histoire. Dans ma mémoire, je me revois à quatre pattes chercher à l'aveuglette dans l'obscurité une bobine de film que j'avais échappée par mégarde sur le plancher de la chambre noire de Gabor où j'ai travaillé de nombreuses fois, particulièrement au début des années 80, où m'appliquant alors à finaliser le travail Week-end au paradis terrestre. Mais c'est une anecdote sur le travail en chambre noire où on égare une bobine de film dans le noir. Ceci dit, ma rencontre avec Gabor date du début des années 70. Elle coïncide aussi avec celle de Pierre Godard. Gabor terminait son travail sur les paysages et les gens de Charlevoix.
Pas de paysage. Je fais pas de paysage.
Je pense que tu fais même des portraits paysages, mais ça c'est une autre chose. Ceci dit, et Pierre finalisait et se préparait à montrer l'exposition Les prisons à l'Office national du film. Je parle de cela parce que nous avons rencontré Gabor et Pierre par l'entremise de Ronald Solomon, qui était le conservateur en chef du service de la photographie de l'Office national du film à Ottawa, qui avait une galerie, la galerie de l'image, et qui nous a encouragés à rencontrer des gens comme Gabor, qu'il considérait comme parmi les gens importants, actifs dans cette photographie, dans ce que j'appelle cette photographie naissante au Québec et au Canada. Je mélange un peu des idées, mais je dirais que la chance que j'ai et que nous avons eue, et je reviendrai, quand je parle de nous, je reviendrai à qui j'entends par le nous, c'est les gens du groupe d'action photographique, c'est les gens d'Israéli, c'est les gens du groupe de photographes populaires. Mais la chance que nous avons eue, en fait, c'est de pouvoir rencontrer des gens qui avaient cette expérience. Nous pouvions apprendre directement de l'expérience de Gabor, par exemple. Nous pouvions voir son travail, interroger son travail. Et sûrement que Gabor a eu cette chance avec d'autres photographes lorsqu'il travaillait à l'Office du film du Québec, mais je pense que nous avions cette chance inespérée et nous étions de cette première génération d'artistes, de photographes. C'est mon point de vue sur l'histoire, cette première génération d'artistes, de photographes au Québec et au Canada qui pouvions apprendre directement de nos pairs. Moi, je m'en tiens à cela.
Well, I met Gabor's work before I met Gabor. So my introduction was to his work in more of an academic sort of sense. I was at Dawson, and I think it was probably my first year, and David Hopkins, who I think is in the crowd somewhere tonight, had brought one of Gabor's prints in, and it was of boys playing ball in Pointe Saint-Charles with the stairs coming down. And I was told yesterday that it was Eva Zamova's and not David's, but it's living at David's. Yeah. And he had brought it in, and he asked us to come up and look at the print. And it's one of those images, starting out as a photographer, that has sort of been lodged there. It's one of those images that every time that I see it now, I sort of think of that first moment that I actually saw a beautiful fiber-based print in which the moment was captured, and sort of this sense of being was captured. That photograph, and then I think there's one photograph of the nun and the airplane. For me, again, that's another photograph that is sort of just lodged in my sort of visual images that I'll refer to every now and then to remember that moment of being introduced to photography and that sort of like the want to photograph and to capture. So a lot of it was through inspiration. A little anecdote that I do have was I was at Dawson, probably one of my first years, and I got into the metro, and Gabor was sitting in the metro, and I stood holding the pole, and I said, "Oh my God, that's Gabor." And my friend had said, "Well, go introduce yourself." And I said, "Well, no, I can't do that." And so it's funny that now, today, I'm sitting here.
You should have.
I should have, I know.
Gabor, do you have anything to correct so that it is
Well,
stories?
I met myself some time ago. Well, you know, all these, the three of my colleagues, they were all very different meetings. And I think Michel était le premier avant toi, Léo.
Oui.
Et toi, c'était quoi, il y a 6 semaines? Non, je n'ai pas de commentaires. Plus tard.
Moi j'aimerais rajouter une chose rapidement que j'ai pas dit. En fait, j'avais préparé une conférence un peu formelle parce que je voulais comme rendre un témoignage un peu plus formel à Gabor. Mais en fait, rencontrer Gabor, c'est aussi rencontrer, pour un jeune photographe d'à peine sorti de l'adolescence, rencontrer Gabor, Gabor en particulier, parce que je me suis beaucoup lié à Gabor, c'est aussi avoir la chance inouïe d'entrer dans un univers de création. Mais c'est aussi rencontrer, comme j'ai écrit un peu dans mon texte, que j'essaie d'oublier, c'est aussi rencontrer Doreen, c'est aussi rencontrer une jeune enfant, son père, un chat qui erre dans la maison, mais aussi c'est rencontrer un univers de production, un univers de création, un artiste qui va nous introduire aussi à plein de gens aussi, à des gens comme, y compris Stanley Triggs, qui a été, sinon, je crois, le premier conservateur de la photographie aux archives Notmans. Mais c'est entrer dans un univers de création. Comment ça pense, comment ça fonctionne, comment ça vit un artiste avec ses appareils photographiques, sa chambre noire, ses projets, etc.
J'ai trouvé ton rouleau de film qui t'a échappé.
Excellent.
J'ai développé, il n'y avait rien là-dessus.
Mais c'est dur de faire des bonnes photos, tu le sais.
Ouais.
C'est plus dur qu'on pense.
Oui, c'est dur. Oui.
Well, I'm glad we're keeping the record straight.
Yes. Yeah.